Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to WeatherBrains episode number 842 for the 7th of March, 2022. My name is James, and this is the pre-show. It is a magical time. This is the time where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. And I botched it. It happens sometimes. If you're looking for the actual show content, move the slider up about 10 minutes, and you'll find it where the actual show begins. But we might say something outrageous here tonight. But welcome. It's our Monday night weather party. Hope you've had a good weekend, a good Monday. We had one here. We had a really low-end severe weather risk, and we got away without a single warning. And we will certainly take that. Anytime you get a cold front through here in March with no severe weather, that is a win for us. Of course, everybody was not so lucky back in Arkansas yesterday, and then Iowa, obviously Saturday. That was a horrible, horrible situation there. We'll talk about that tonight, and actually a lot of things to talk about tonight. Had some communication issues within the National Weather Service, which was kind of a mess. But let's invite everybody onto the show here, and we'll get this sucker underway. I'm trying to think who's here and who's not here. We'll find out. The one way to find out is to invite everybody. So let's bring them all in. And I think we got most folks here tonight. All right. So we have now invited the gang, and they will be on here with us in just a moment. Yeah, I had a good old faux today with no severe weather, which is quite odd for us. Typically, when you get low 80s and dew points up around 60 and a cold front sweeping in, you've got some weather problems. But the main dynamic support, the lifting mechanism was just too far north. And the better instability was to the south. The shear values were marginal, and the whole thing was a very low-end threat to start with. And again, we got away without a single warning. And we will take that because I was not in the mood to work a severe weather event today. Not that I'm in the mood any day to do that, but the next really headline is going to be at the end of the week when this cold air rushes in over the eastern half of the country. It's going to turn cold. But thankfully, late season cold snaps don't last especially long. But with the cold, some of you might see some snow down, maybe Arkansas, Tennessee, maybe a little bit, maybe a few flurries down here into my neck of the woods. And that would be Friday night into early Saturday morning. And then we've got a very potent late season freeze ahead the upcoming weekend, the weekend of the 12th and 13th. I was looking at the record low here for March 13th. That's Sunday. And we're expecting lows way down in the 20s, thinking that maybe we would be flirting with a record. But as it turns out, I totally forgot. March 13th, I should know what the record low is for March 13th. And some of you should know, too, if you're a weather dweeb. The record low for March 13th here came in the year 1993. Does anybody remember what happened in mid-March 1993? March 12th, 13th, the blizzard of 93. We had 1 to 2 feet of snow on the ground. The sky cleared, radiational cooling. The bottom fell out. 12 degrees in mid-March at this latitude. So we're not going to be that cold on Sunday, so no records. But it's hard to believe, looking back on the blizzard, that thing was, goodness, 29 years ago. Oh, man, that's unbelievable. 29 years ago. And for those that don't know, the storm of the century, blizzard of 93, whatever you call it, we had where we are down here, we had hurricane force wind gust on the ridges, 1 to 2 feet of snow. We had 4-foot snow drifts in spots. We had convective snow, thunder, lightning. And for a while, we had whiteout conditions. And I mean, some of the folks that have lived here all their lives, they got disoriented. And that's when it's really bad, in the middle of March, when the tulips were blooming and the dogwoods were blooming, and it was one for the ages. That's a generational snowstorm. That'll certainly be a generational storm for me. The next time we have one like that, I will probably not be around. The lovely Aubrey is here tonight.
Hi, James.
Welcome back.
Oh, it's just
Welcome
me and
back.
you.
I guess we got the whole show tonight. It's us.
Oh, this is going to be great.
Greatest show ever.
Ever.
In fact, I'm the guy that's supposed to. Murray has not been on here lately. I think Bill has got something going on here.
He's not been with me, I promise.
Okay. All right, good. That's good to know. And that's a show title, but we can't use the show title because it is not in the actual recorded show. But let me get our guest on here. And it must be some kind of elongated 50-cent beer night at Hooters or something. I don't know what's going on with him.
It's a weekly deal.
Yeah, it is. All right, so I'm going to get Christina. And all right, she is now invited. And here comes everybody else. Rick is here. Neil is here. Troy will be here momentarily. Neil, thanks for last week. That was a great show. I love that. I listened to it almost twice.
That was a lot of fun.
It was great. We need to do that more often. We need to take individuals that are regulars on this show and put them on the hot seat so we can ask questions. But that was good. All right. So y'all remember Aubrey? Her name is Aubrey Urbanowitz.
It's been a few weeks.
she used to do the show.
A few months.
A few years, whatever.
I've had a lot going on.
Well,
I was out of town.
It's a busy time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
For everybody. I've learned where we are down here, you don't take vacation weeks in March and April, because the minute you do that, you'll have a tornado outbreak and you got to come right back. I quit doing that back in the 80s. And actually Taylor, who works mornings here, she took this week off because her parents invited her to go to Florida, and it was kind of a free trip, and you got to go on those.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, we did not have to call her back today because it was kind of severe weather, was a no-show. But yeah, it's just busy. I'm doing 2 and 3 school visits a day, and we've got, so much going on. Now, are you coming to the Starkville party, Aubrey?
I am. Already booked the flight and hotel and everything, so looking forward to it.
Awesome. We're going to have a good time. I was working on my talk presentation.
I'm debating on submitting for an abstract. I had an idea.
Go for it.
But it's getting crunch time. So I gotta see if I can put it together this week.
Yeah, they want me to submit mine by Friday. So that's the reason I was frantically working on it today.
That's a great conference. I've only been to it once, but I'd love to go back again. That's really well done, really well put together. The students do an awesome job, and I love the cowbell. So
yep,
yeah,
it's a good one. All right, I'm gonna grab some water real quick before.
For the cowbell, I got a fever, and the prescription is more cowbell. I think it probably ruined his career. That's all people think of him for now. Hey, Christina, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, my internet is connected to the wrong things. I'm trying to fix something real quick.
Okay. Jen, how are you?
I'm good. How are you all?
We're good.
Hey.
Good to see Aubrey on the show this week.
Yay.
And Rick, we'll let you introduce Christina. Here comes Troy. So the gang is all here. I think Bill is on. He's back at 50-cent beer night at Hooters again. All right, let's get this thing going here. Let's record track 1 and record track 2. And let me be sure I got the right open. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
WeatherBrains is brought to you by Midland Weather Radio. Every home, school, and business should have a NOAA Weather Radio, the official voice of the National Weather Service. And the AMS Weather Band.
Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band. The AMS Weather Band is a global community of weather enthusiasts dedicated to learning and sharing their love of science. Visit amsweatherband.org to learn more and join the band today.
Hey, WeatherBrains, episode number 842, the weekly show that's all about weather. Oldest weather podcast in the universe. 16 years and we're still here. Our Monday night party is here. Thanks a lot for joining us. We got a lot to talk about. Troy Kimmel, I see you just joined in. You have dialed in. You are locked and loaded. What's happening?
Well, I thought I was, and the mic was still over there. So that shows you how locked and loaded I am. No, it's been interesting weekend and an interesting week as well, which we'll talk a little more about. But the weather here in Austin today has been really nice. Highs in the mid to upper 50s, and we had a little sunshine late this afternoon. Got a little rain tomorrow, and maybe a late season freeze by the weekend. More cold air headed this way.
Yeah, buddy. I'm excited. Look who's back. Aubrey is back.
Yeah.
Welcome back. We've missed you.
Missed you guys.
And that almost sounded sincere when you said that. Almost.
Well, I have a local thing that I do once a month on Mondays. Then I was out of town for an event and a couple other things going on. And somehow Mondays are a popular day.
Yeah.
Mondays are a busy day. Well, how's life? How are you?
Life is good. Life is very busy. And I think that's my struggle right now, is just trying to juggle everything that I have going on. And of course, taking care of the bear. So, but life is good. We've had some really nice temperatures here. The taste of spring. It's not going to last past 4:00 this afternoon. back to March reality, but that's good. We need that because, I mean, if we hop into spring too fast, you're talking agriculture, huge impacts because we're going to get later frosts and freezes. So that's good. We need to jump back to reality.
Yeah, we do. Dr. Neil Jacobs, thank you for last week. That was a great show.
Amazing
I went back
show.
and listened to that one twice.
That was a lot
you.
of fun. I enjoyed that.
So where are you this evening? You are
I'm in North Carolina.
Okay.
And we're the front hasn't gone through here yet, so it's still pretty warm. The last few days have actually been really warm, but I think it's going to be rainy and cool after that.
Yeah, we did the faux pas here about 1 this afternoon. So we've cooled down, and that kind of ended the severe weather threat, which is good. Jen
Just came across I-81. So the front's through now. It's headed your way, Neil.
I know. I'm looking at the radar. This line of storms may hit before the show's over. We'll see.
Right. If your power goes out, we'll know that it finally arrived. Now, do you have a generator, Neil, at your place?
I do. Yep.
I figured if anybody had a generator, it's Neil.
I've got a funny generator story.
Go.
This is probably 10 or so years ago, maybe 15 years ago. There was a big debate about the precipitation type for this one particular event. And Ryan Boyles, who was the deputy state climatologist at the time, ran into me at Home Depot buying a generator. And then I think tweeted it out or posted it on Facebook, saw Neil in the hardware store buying a generator, and it like pandemonium ensued after that.
Mass panic will follow when they see you doing that. Everybody panics. So
At least you've got one, Neil. I'm still waiting on my Generac one to get here, and that's been ordered it or bought it about 9 or 10 months ago, and nothing yet. So
what?
Nope.
What's the delay?
It's something called supply chain stuff.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah.
Yep.
Goodness.
Yep.
All right. Let's see. And Kim, by the way, said she's going to be here a few minutes late. She'll be here shortly. But Jen, how are you? Do you have a generator?
I do, actually. I got one a few months ago. We had a power outage here. It lasted probably, I don't know, a couple of hours. And I just started thinking about it. I thought it was just a good thing to have just in case. Something awful happens. We have, strong winds or, icing or whatever, because we get everything here pretty much in one day, which is what happened. Today, we had a lot of heavy rain. We even had some flooding up here in West Central Ohio. And then now it's 35 and we're quiet for a little bit. Then we're back into the cold with some snow coming in into the week. So it looks like we're back into that pattern where we have the front upper low thing that hits the central plains and then moves east. So we're back into that pattern here for at least this week. So it's going to be pretty busy for me later in the week as I watch my plane stations, Kansas City and Topeka and all those folks. So, but then we just get cold for part of the weekend and we should get a little bit better. And staying busy with Tornado Talk. I want to give a shout out to my crew, my chipmunks who worked really hard this month. We tackled 6 events, 2 new events. One of them is from 1834 in Virginia. And then the rest of them were all updates to summaries that we have on the website. And they were complete overhauls with news stories and interviews and photos and stuff. So I'm really proud of them. They worked their booties off this month. So we'll see what happens. And next, we've got 2 new super outbreaks we're going to work on for the anniversary, April 27th. So
you're saying, Jen, you did something from 1834. I don't recall, James, you and I getting the phone call, seeing what we could tell them, you know.
No, we were both on television back then. So I mean, we're kind of hurt that you didn't call us.
I'm so sorry. I should have interviewed you guys.
Oh man, I can't believe y'all didn't call us. I mean,
we were working with Marconi on Morse code.
I remember that, James. We walked uphill in the snow, both hills that day.
2 feet
barefoot.
of snow. Yeah,
Uphill both ways barefoot.
All right. So Rick Smith, I will let you introduce our special guest and take it away until 8 p.m. CT when you got to go.
All right. And I'm no Neil Jacobs, but I had a similar story back a few years ago. I tweeted a picture of me cleaning out my storm shelter, and that got attention. So,
oh boy,
I have to reserve that for the very special days now because people are watching. Okay. Well, I'm honored to have Christina Crow with us tonight. Christina is a master instructor at the NWS Leadership Academy. Christina is from St. Louis, Missouri, got her start in meteorology at the University of Missouri, then went on to the University of Alabama at Huntsville for a master's. She's worked at WFOs in St. Louis and Springfield, Missouri, as well as Huntsville. And she also had an interesting position, we want to talk about this later, the program coordination officer. I think we've had another guest on recently that talked about their experience with that and even helped manage congressional affairs at NOAA NESDIS. So really varied background. And not to bury the lead here, but Christina is also the 2022 president-elect of the National Weather Association. So we have very impressive credentials here with us tonight. She was on WeatherBrains. I checked way back September of 2011, episode 296. I think that's when you were getting ready for the NWA meeting following the April 27th outbreak. So Christina, welcome to WeatherBrains.
Hello, hello, hello. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome, you're here. We always like to start out kind of, tell us about how you got interested in weather. How did you end up in the meteorology world?
So for me, it's kind of like, everybody either seems to have a story about some terrible weather event they went through or just some teacher that really inspired them. And mine's kind of a slight amalgamation of the two. In 4th grade, we read a book in our English class called The Night of the Twisters. I don't know if anybody's heard of that one, but it's a story about these kids that go through a tornado outbreak and their story of their experience. And I was fascinated by it, but I distinctly remember the day we finished the book, my mom picked me up from school and we were driving home and the sky started turning that eerie shade of green. And I was like, Mom, this happened in the book. This means bad weather's coming. We got to get home. And as a mother would do with a 4th grader, just rolls her eyes, says, sure, honey, sure, you know what's happening. But we get home and not a few minutes later, this massive hailstorm comes over the house. And I distinctly remember having this feeling of, I knew it was coming. And so that kind of got me sucked in. My dad was a St. Louis City police officer when I was younger. And so one of the things they would always do is go to weather service spotter training classes. And so I think 6th grade was the first time he took me to my very first spotter training class and kind of got this whole, whoa, there's another option besides being on TV and doing this. Okay, this seems really cool. So I kind of started down my weather service path then.
That's very cool. Yeah, that's a cool story. That is kind of a combination of some of the traditional origin stories you hear. Now, we have a lot of students that listen to WeatherBrains, and I think you had kind of an interesting path into the Weather Service. There's a couple of different avenues. We talked to students about pathways, or what used to be SCEP, and Holling scholarships, and you got really involved in all of that. Kind of talk about your path from college into the Weather Service and the different positions it took you to get to an eventual full-time position.
It's interesting because I owe a lot of it to Pat Market at Mizzou, who was kind of my advisor in undergrad and kind of pointed me in the direction of any path to get you into an agency that you might want to work for is a great path to take, even if it doesn't seem thrilling as a student. And so my first Weather Service foray was he had pointed out a SCEP internship with the Meteorological Development Lab. And as somebody who was very adamantly focused on operations as an undergrad, I was like, why would I ever go work for a headquarters office? That sounds dumb. It's computer programming stuff. It's working on verification stats. That sounds terrible. Why would I do that? And so Pat was just like, just try it out. It's not a commonplace people get applicants. It gets your foot in the door. And I'm so thankful he did that, because it was a great learning experience. And at the time it told me, that, well, it gave me the working for Weather Service is really cool. Working in Silver Spring was really neat. It was kind of overwhelming because it was my first big move away from the Midwest. So kind of I grew that way. And I picked up a lot of both teamwork, collaboration, and just the skills of figuring things out that you don't know how to do, but just have to figure out how to do in a work environment. And it's because I didn't know Fortran, and that's what they wanted me to do there. And so it was daunting, but I learned some of it, and I found other ways to contribute until I got up to speed on that. And so it did me in good stead, getting that lab experience. And then while I was there, the Hollings program got launched. And so I applied for that because I needed scholarship money, and being able to have another opportunity to connect with NOAA as a whole seemed really neat. And that then allowed me the opportunity to do an internship at the St. Louis office and try out that forecast office experience. And it was interesting too, because so many people were telling me, well, you have a free ticket to go wherever you want in the agency, go to like a national center, go to some big place. And I was like, but I think my path is at a forecast office. I feel like I want to try that out to know before I'm sucked into it full time, if that's what I want to do. So that was a lesson in sometimes taking the advice of people, and sometimes saying, I appreciate your insights, but I know what's right for me. Mm-hmm. So that was a big deal for me. And I did some other SCEP internships when I was in grad school and things of that sort. But I do want to add that the other big thing as a student that helped me was getting involved in NWA, because it helped me build my network and connections with professionals, and allowed me opportunity to build some leadership skills and kind of collaborating with more than just my office. I was, my Facebook on this day, like yesterday, was that I was leading my first committee chair, the first committee call for the Weather Analysis and Forecasting Committee as a chair. And so 9 years ago, but I had also been on that committee as a student, and that got me there. So those are a lot of my early things that was helpful for me as a student, kind of getting into the industry, so to speak.
Yeah, that's awesome. You really can't oversell, you really can't overestimate the importance of that networking as early as you can get into doing it. And NWA, AMS are great places to do that, obviously.
Yes.
So
yes,
when
AMS was amazing for that too.
Yeah. AMS is a little more overwhelming than NWA, but as far as annual meetings go. But so what was your first forecast, or I guess it was meteorologist intern position then, but where did you start a full-time job in the Weather Service? Was it Huntsville?
first full-time job was actually at Springfield, that I was a med intern. So that was a good crash course in dealing with hydro issues and ice versus snow issues. And they had a really great group of lead forecasters to learn from when I got there, and got to do upper air and all that fun there as well. I don't miss doing upper air there. And my coldest ever upper air launch was 18 below. And the Springfield airport, we had to call to get clearance to launch our balloons. They're like, well, could you wait just a few minutes? We have a flight that might be coming in. And I was like, it's 18 below, man. He's like, yeah, go ahead and launch. Go ahead and launch.
Wow. Springfield's a busy office. I remember when the modernization was going on and there was all these new WFOs spinning up and opening up. I remember Springfield was like at the top of the most popular offices list for some reason. Springfield, Nashville, trying to remember. It's a beautiful country, but man, they do get a lot of different weather. So that was a good place to start. And then how long were you there? And then how did you end up in Huntsville?
So funnily enough, I was at the Springfield almost a year, almost exactly to the day. I had been a SCEP at Huntsville, and then moved in September of 2009 to Springfield, and then ended up bidding and getting a job as a journey forecaster back at Huntsville, and moving. I think it was a day past 1 year that my transfer date was. And I had bid on the job back in Huntsville because I was sure that somebody else on station was a shoo-in for the job, but I wanted to get the practice and the experience. And I was like, well, that'd be fun though if I ended up back there, because it's again a challenging forecast area, such a great community collaboration with the emergency managers. I loved that environment. So I was like, well, if I get it, I'll enjoy it. And in some ways it was good. I feel like I went into the interview a lot less stressed, because I wasn't just terrified about not getting it. I was just focused on getting a good interview in and getting that practice. And when BMIC gave me a call to offer me the job, I'm like, what? Are you sure? But it was a lesson too, in that, the person on station I thought would get selected, they knew they were going to have another job coming up, and they knew they needed somebody with programming experience, and that person didn't have it. And that internship I did at MDL, all the IT and computer programming stuff that I had learned, I had built that skill set, and that kind of came back to not haunt me, but came back to benefit me for the Huntsville job, being able to provide that support to the rest of the staff by working on our AWIPS and GFE as we were kind of headed into the AWIPS 2 test mode. That was the one fun bit of going back to Huntsville, working on that.
Christina, Troy Kimmel here. Good to talk to you tonight. One thing I tell my students always is just say never and you will see, because those sort of thing happen. It's amazing, like Rick said, when you least expect it, sometime are the times that you're surprised the most.
Yeah, and it's interesting with my career of people are asking me, what do you want to do next? What do you want to do next? And it's like I'm hesitant to say, because I'm learning very early on that any plans I have are generally going to go awry, but in a good way. So I'm kind of in the zone of less particular path focused and more of, these are the general things I want to do, and I'm going to see what opportunities pop up and sound exciting, because new stuff's going to develop. Opportunities are going to pop up you don't expect. So yeah.
You just never know. You never know how it's going to all come together. Okay, so you were in Huntsville. Now, you were there in 2011, right? You were there for the April 27th
Correct.
event?
Correct. I was back at Huntsville for 6 months, 8 months. So I was really not very long into my kind of full-fledged forecaster mode. We're going into that event. It was was a doozy, but one that it was really confidence building, and the fact that it was such a big event that the staff trusted me, even with, how relatively green I was to fulfill the roles that I did. And we had a great team up there that worked together to work that event.
Yeah, and we'll come back around to that. I think that event eventually helped shape some of the work that you're working on now. So we'll come back around to that. So somehow or another, I want you to kind of talk about this rotational assignment, this program coordination officer, PCO. I don't know if it used to be called something else, but I think this was my first opportunity to meet you when you came through the Norman office with whoever the weather service director was at that time. But kind of talk about that program, how you get into that, and what it entails. It's kind of a fascinating opportunity, really.
Yeah, and I'll let Neil chime in at any point later if he wants to weigh in on the PCOs. But Weather Service and other line offices of NOAA to some extent have these rotations, but Weather Service very specifically has a 2-year rotational assignment where in year 1, you come into headquarters and you are on the staff of the Weather Service director for a year. You're kind of the right-hand person. You're helping staff them when they travel. You're helping to develop their speaking remarks, their presentations. You're going to meetings and just learning all the inner workings of headquarters and just how widespread the Weather Service functions are, how they all fit together. And you're really just taking a full-on crash course in Weather Service from the headquarters level, while also being that immediate voice from the field, because they purposely try to hire people who are coming from forecast offices, because we can be that fresh voice in the front office of Weather Service, and a different perspective coming through on a regular basis. So you spend a year with the director. I was with Louis when we came to Norman, and it's been very sad to see him go, because I really respect Louis a whole lot. I spent a lot of time with that man for a year, and we had some great experiences. I learned so much from him. And so that whole year, though, is really just prep work for year 2 of the rotation, where NOAA has a team of 6 PCOs, program coordination officers, that are the rep for the line office in the NOAA administrator's office. They're kind of the conduit for planning and coordination for a lot of things when there's only so much time or so much bandwidth for the director of each line office to answer questions or collect information. So the PCOs kind of serve that liaison role and kind of collaboration role, and support whatever the NOAA administrator needs, whatever the Deputy Undersecretary for Operations needs, and also just works with the other bits and pieces of NOAA from the headquarters level, whether it's international stuff or congressional stuff, or the Secretary of Commerce needs a forecast for travel, that the Weather Service person will get asked for that. So we kind of do that kind of work, and kind of that liaison work. And so I worked under Dr. Sullivan, who was our NOAA administrator at the time when I was there.
It's an amazing program. One of my favorite things to do when I was in the Hoover building was go down to the PCO office. We called it the bullpen. And I would just hang out down there because the amount of information that I would learn was unbelievable. But I'm curious, when you were PCO, did they do the 3 things memos?
Oh, yes. I am skilled in 3 things.
I got to tell everyone here, this is the most genius way to convey information in a short amount of time, are these what they call the 3 things memos, or 3 TMs. And it's basically just a 1-pager. And it's just like the 3 top things you need to know, because 2 is probably not enough and 4 is information overload. I'm not sure how they arrived at 3, but below the 3 things was this red flag section. So every time I would get a 3 TM, I would go to the red flags just to see what sort of landmines I was going to step on. And a lot of times it was like the red flags are great because they just tell you all the different things to look out for. And then, but that was something that I'd never really thought about, that if I ever end up in another high level management position somewhere, I'm going to implement that entire process, because I thought it was genius. But I can't imagine how many of those you probably had to write. Was that just, you were probably doing like several a day, I would guess.
Oh yeah. Well, and we would review each other's, like it was a PCO rule that nothing goes to the administrator until if one PCO writes it, another one has to review it before it gets to the chief of staff to get put in the book. And so we would gut check things like, hey, well, they know what that acronym means, because that's one your line office uses that you know really well, but I don't know that one. So I think my fastest ever turnaround on a 3 things memo was like 20 minutes from scratch, because something had blown up and we had to collect some information because somebody was going somewhere that it had to be in their hands. So that was one of those, like, you get it out, then you say, please don't make me ever do that again.
And just to jump in real quick, if people may not understand, my experience with the 3 things memo is when, like, Louis was coming to visit the office or Neil was coming to visit the office. We would put together 3 things, or we would give an outline or something, and the PCO would put it together. But what are the 3 most important things that they need to know about, or projects we're working on, and then the red flag section. So yeah, that was the main use. I'm sure there's other uses for it, but to us it was like some very important persons coming to visit, need to tell them things to talk about, things to ask about, things that are going on at the office. So just a little.
Well,
it used to make me anxious. Like, I would get these emails forwarded and there would be like this entire discussion, and then I felt guilty, like I'm generating this much anxiety out in the field just by showing up. I just wanted to like drive by with like some donuts and say hi.
Well, and that's the thing that was always interesting from the staff side, was because you're whoever you're working for has so much on their plate and so many things they have to contend with. It's how do you make sure you're making the best use of their time and the best use of like the time of the people they're meeting with or the people they're going to see, to make sure it's like, because sometimes you like have those meetings where you just walk in and nobody really knows why you're there, and then you spend 30 minutes and you're like, well, that was nice, but was that a real good use of our time? Other than like, if the purpose was relationship building, then yes. But if we really needed to get A, B, or C done so that this person you're meeting with can actually like make something happen, well, then we kind of failed. And now we have to have another meeting, and or it takes 10 times more work. So that's, yeah, it was always that. I think that's the biggest thing I've taken away from that process, was just getting clear about why you're doing things and what are the biggest things you have to deal with, and what are the landmines you might step in.
I've got one more question, then I'm going to hand it back to Rick. So when you were PCO, I mean, this is the thing that was interesting to me, and it's got to be interesting to early career folks who find themselves in this position, is how much you're involved with Congress and OMB and all this process, like the typical inside the beltway, sausage making. What was it like as PCO to sort of, prep your principal for hearings and other things that, or just your typical tag up with representatives or senators?
It's daunting, and it's the kind of thing that if you had asked me 5 years before I did the job, if I thought it was interesting or valuable, I probably would have said, no, let me go back to forecasting P-type for this next winter storm. Thank you very much. But being able to have an appreciation for what has to happen so that the forecasters can sit there and do the forecast for the P-type and work with the partners and get the satellite data from the other country and to get the money that's needed to do all that goes into making that forecaster able to do their job. that's what fascinated me about that part of working with the Hill and international affairs and the White House, and just realizing how cool it is and how hard it is for all of that to work well. And just recognizing the impact that I could have at that level of just helping make sure they got that right piece of information, or, oh, we connected these dots that then that congresswoman actually really, really cares about that because it impacts their district. And so we got their buy-in on something. Like those pieces, then that was the replacement for the P-type forecasting that got me jazzed working up at headquarters.
Yeah, that's cool. I was always fascinated that was just a forecaster from a WFO that jumped into that role and did that. And what a whirlwind of learning and information that would have been, and what an experience to just be behind the scenes of all of that. And you mentioned making the most of the, whoever it is their very important time. One of the things I remember of all the PCOs is seems like they were always that person that was the schedule keeper. Like, Louis, we have another meeting, we have to go, when it's time to, you would like drag him out of the office in time to get to the next meeting, because everything is very structured. I mean, you're very busy, so I always thought that would be a cool job to have.
Well, and I'll just add too, it's interesting of then how much that then filters into like post that when I'm managing my own schedule, of recognizing the value of setting boundaries on your time and moving on to the next thing when you need to move on to the next thing, and be purposeful with your meetings and getting stuff done and being clear about stuff of that. There's a lot there that I think we can all use and benefit from. But yeah, pulling Louis from meeting to meeting, he most extroverted guy I think I've ever met in my life, and just loved talking with people and engaging with people. So getting him to move on to the next meeting was always the biggest challenge, but yeah, love him a lot.
yeah, that's awesome. We'll miss him for sure. Okay, now somewhere in there, I don't know if you transitioned directly from that position, you came back out into the field, into the quote real world. Did you go to the training center right after that?
No, it's kind of a bit of a wonky re-entry post PCO, because it's finding job positions that are open and stuff. And I had a whole hiring freeze impacted me when I came out. So I did a couple odd jobs. I worked on organizational culture when they kind of in the first rounds of the Office of Organizational Excellence was still kind of getting spun up when I came out. So I worked on organizational culture work there for a while, and then ended up over at NOAA NESDIS doing congressional affairs with them for about 9 months before I actually got moved over here. So yeah, so there was a little extra time at headquarters doing random things.
Yeah, because in that position, I mean, you're guaranteed to, you're only there 2 years, so you're going to go work somewhere else eventually. It's just waiting for things to line up. So
yeah, and unless there's some job they can just like drop you into as a lateral, you've got to compete just like everybody else. It's not like it's here's your golden ticket, go wherever you want with a promotion. So
right, exactly. So, but you did eventually end up in Kansas City at the training center. And what were you doing there when you started? And I now, now there's the NWS Leadership Academy. That's kind of explain how that fits in with the training center, what the training center is, and kind of what your role was there and is there.
Yeah. So there are 5 divisions of training within the National Weather Service, and there's been a little restructuring. It was like 2015 when Weather Service kind of reorged its headquarters. And so it put in this Office of the Chief Learning Officer. John Ogren's the Chief Learning Officer of the Weather Service. And then under him and his headquarters budget crew, then there's 5 training divisions. In Kansas City, there are 3 of the 5 training divisions, one of which is the Leadership Academy. We kind of focus on, and that was kind of new in terms of getting official staff members, fully funded full-time staff members. And so kind of lost my train of thought. Oh, so when I came in, there had been kind of, we had a management and supervision class. They had just started this idea of a new hires class that would be great to have just consistent onboarding for everyone in the agency, so that, you don't just get the perspective of what weather service is from Joe, who you work midnight shifts with, that you actually get the bigger picture, understand where you fit and opportunities that might be available to you down the road. And so that new hires class was just getting started prior to my arrival. So we've been doing a lot of work with that. We teach a class for team leads. Since I came on board, I started running the National Weather Service mentoring program and doing a lot of collaboration, trying to find other ways to incorporate more mentoring opportunities around weather service. So that's been a lot of my main work, in addition to working on critical incident stress management.
Yeah, I think the mentoring thing is really interesting and really beneficial. Can you just talk a little bit about what that is? I mean, I know I see email announcements all the time about here's an opportunity, and really trying to get people, mentors, together with mentees, and how does that work within the Weather Service?
Yeah, so the Department of Commerce used to run a formal mentoring program. I think they maybe stopped that in like 2013, 2014, something like that. Funding had gone away, and so they couldn't run it anymore. But there had been a DOC level program, so people could match with other people in Department of Commerce. And it was used to some extent by Weather Service folks, but Weather Service folks very strongly believe in the value of other Weather Service folks as mentors, and more getting into an understanding of the benefit of NOAA mentors, like people from other line offices. But so we started up a formal program that the goal was to really target mid-career mentees, because we have concerns about succession planning, and we have concerns about retention of women and other underrepresented communities within Weather Service. We did a bunch of evaluation and saw we kind of have this gap at mid-career where we could really be helping. And so we're targeting mid-career folks as mentees in the program, trying to connect them with mentors to you've got new hires. We're all really excited to be where we're at, and you've got the energized folks kind of late in their career, excited to being able to help each other. But mid-career folks, there's kind of this dip in job satisfaction, dip in kind of morale, so to speak. So we're like, okay, let's try to get them some additional training, additional help. So we established this mentoring program to help with those things and help build better connections, because it's easy to get isolated in your own office. And so the idea was, let's help people connect with somebody in another region, in another job series, another part of the agency, to broaden their perspective and kind of get them excited about future direction for themselves and for the agency. So we have a formal program that runs once a year. We have nominations, or people apply for the program, and we do a 9-month program for the folks who are selected, and we're in year 4 right now.
Is it still getting pretty good response? Still pretty popular?
Yeah. We end up usually with about somewhere between 70 and 80 mentees each year, and from all over the agency, which is really cool. Getting to see folks connect. We've had folks from WSO Pongo. We've had folks from all the regions involved, and it's cool then seeing too, like, electronics technicians match up with admin staff, match up with forecasters. So it's really for everybody. And it's neat getting to see that kind of cross-pollination across the agency. And it is cool too, because we're also recognizing there's other opportunities we want people to have to be mentored or to mentor others. So it's kind of this planted the seed that now everybody's like, ooh, how else can we do mentoring around the agency? And we have a local mentoring program framework that we built up that provides kind of like a common structure that if an office wants to start a like buddy program to welcome new folks to their office, this gives them a framework they can take, and then we have clear spots where they can modify it for their own uses, and kind of reduce that time to success for launching a program. So that's relatively new, launched in October. So we're continuing to find other ways to build from that.
It's great stuff. I want to selfishly move on to the next topic here. I've got to cut out here in a little bit, and I don't want to leave without talking about my main reason for wanting to have you on the show, in addition to everything else, was the critical incident stress, the work you've done with kind of the mental health side of things, or more specifically, the critical incident stress management. Some of the listeners may not know what that is, and why in the world does it have anything to do with National Weather Service meteorologists. So how did that become an area of interest for you, and kind of how did that get started? Because it really did start very, very small in the Weather Service, but it has continued to grow and grow. So kind of tell that story a little bit, how that started, how you got interested in it, and then what's going on now.
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to give credit and acknowledge the fire weather program within National Weather Service, because honestly, they're the first people in Weather Service to really look at this issue for incident meteorologists. But I came into it differently, separately. Like you had mentioned earlier, I worked in Huntsville in 2011, and I worked forecasting leading up to the event. I worked radar for the event, and I worked on, I can't tell you how many hours worth of damage surveys in the weeks following. That event was really hard on me. And I distinctly remember walking up to a survey area with the tail end of EF4 damage. And there had been a fatality in the neighborhood. And I remember getting out of a car with my survey partner and with one of the EMs. And I'm just standing there in the middle of this completely devastated neighborhood. And it just dawns on me, like, nobody ever really prepared me for this. The sights, the smells, the sounds, the like family members of the person who died are out there picking through things, and you're trying to figure out how to be a scientist and survey the damage and evaluate it, but like be a person and also not let it weigh so heavily on you that you can keep functioning. So I struggled through that event, but I made it through the event. There are definitely some impacts that I felt in the months following that event. I would distinctly remember, though, the NWA that fall, there was a session where there was video from chasers from the outbreak and the tornado tearing up a neighborhood, and we were all in the big ballroom and watching that video, and I think I basically kind of had like a panic attack. Like I lost it. I couldn't keep myself together. So I got up, and a couple of friends followed me. One who's a broadcaster who'd been around for a while, and they kind of were checking on me, make sure I was okay. And I was telling them, I was like, this, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know why I can't handle this. And the broadcaster friend of mine's like, this is what happened to me after Katrina. Like this is a lot. What we do is a lot, and it's hard. So I had a couple conversations with a couple other folks, just kind of, the hushed conversation of seasoned people I knew, to kind of ask them, like, am I crazy? Is this normal? And I was amazed. Almost every person I talked to who'd been around for a while was just absolutely said, yes, this is something that happens. You work these events. I can tell you all the details of such and such event that has stuck with me, and that I'm still dealing with. And I'm like, why has nobody told people about this so I could be prepared? So that was kind of my initial step into this. And over the course of subsequent years, I would have conversations with social scientists and other folks and kind of landed in discovering that there's this critical incident stress is something that is coined in the 70s. And it's kind of mainly been in the niche of military and first responder communities, that's talking about the particular kind of stress that comes with being exposed to a disaster or trauma of some kind, whether it is natural or man-made. And so it's something that what's been most fascinating to me about working on this project and this effort for so long is anytime we talk to somebody who's specifically in behavioral health or in kind of in this critical incident stress management community, that when they find out what we do and kind of our exposure to disasters, they kind of have this I should have had a V8 moment of, well, duh, of course you guys are being exposed to this. Why haven't we been talking with you guys and helping you work through this? So that has been motivating, and it kind of feels like we are continuing to push boulders uphill, but I feel like we're making progress on making this an okay topic to discuss as a community and kind of getting some resources so that, it took us 10 years from my perspective, but we're getting there.
Hey, we're getting there, and it's important that the conversation is definitely out there. I think it's interesting. There's a lot of thoughts about this, but I think that's one of the things that causes people to hesitate talking about it is critical incident stress or secondary stress or PTSD or all the associated things. They're so often associated with military and firemen and people that are in it, that are on the front lines, that are pulling rubble off of people and rescuing and being shot at and all that. And for me, for a long time, I thought, well, whatever it is I'm feeling, I have no right to feel that. I mean, I'm just sitting in an office, an air-conditioned office, drinking my Diet Coke. Yeah, it's stressful in the office, but I'm not doing what they're doing. So it was like, I don't have any right to feel that way. But one of the mental health professionals we worked with at an AMS meeting, I remember that specific thing that you just said. It's like, of course, why would you not be affected by this? So I think one of the most important things that you're doing and has been done as we talk more about this is just talking about it and just letting people know that it is a thing. It is something that it's normal and it's okay to feel. And, it's our profession experiences that. I think you did an AMS presentation in Austin. I think that's the first time I saw that really, really come out just openly and just talking about it. And ever since then, I was just, I'm really passionate about the subject too. So, we've done some things together, and other people have been very involved in things, trying to get it out there maybe get rid of some of the stigma and open some conversation. Talk about, like, we've done stuff at AMS, NWA, and talk about some of the initiatives that you've kind of led to get the conversation out there and to keep the conversation going, I guess.
Well, and just to kind of build on that theme you were talking about of, mine isn't that, so it's not valid kind of feeling. And what I think has been the most validating thing for me when talking to the psychologists is they're saying, if you think about a first responder, they are thrown into the disaster when the disaster has happened. They do the thing and it's done. Whereas we have a slightly less kind of bell curve, but it is a longer exposure because we are now forecasting, knowing terrible things are going to happen for sometimes a week ahead of time. And we have this learned helplessness of, we can't change that hurricane from coming. And so there's this challenge of what are we able to do to change a situation? Well, we can't. And the pressure of the types of decisions that are being made on the information we provide, all of that then builds up to then the day itself, getting to the point where we can't even handle then, okay, now we have the aftermath too. So And I apologize. My laptop battery has just said that it is going to die and I need to go grab the charger. I really, really apologize. Can I go be right back?
Sure.
Yes, it's going to make me very stressed, but you can.
I'm sorry. Me too. I'll be right back.
Christina's done incredible work with this, and it's, it is interesting to think that for so long people didn't talk about this. I know after the 2011 tornadoes, I know the Birmingham office, Huntsville office had, counselors come in, and we had counselors come in our office after the May 2013 tornadoes, mainly because the MIC, Jim Stefkovich in Birmingham, called and pushed us to do that. He said, you need to do this. You don't realize what an impact it has on the staff. And it really did help. And it's important to remember too, that this is not just, it's not just the person issuing the warning. It's not just somebody who's at a weather service office. It's TV meteorologist. It can be, this goes into the journalism world, photojournalists and reporters. Any of this, even though you're not in the disaster, even though you didn't get hit by the tornado, it's that indirect exposure. So I've just learned so much about it, and it's helped me because I know I've been affected by events. And
do you think, Rick, it's getting better out there? And I want to go back to Kim, because Kim shared so many stories over the years here on WeatherBrains about things she's done and getting out in the field, and you can kind of get a feel for what's happening there. But, I think probably even back to first responders, which I have a little experience in, there was always, Rick and Kim, this big, I'm tough, I can handle it. We'll just, we'll plow just ahead, and by God, I'll get on the other side and go from there. I'm hoping in 2022 that something's going right, and that people out there, especially in the weather service, and even people in the media, and for that matter, let's extend to first responders, will go get help if they need it.
I think it's definitely better than it used to be. And, in large part to Christina's work and Becky DePodwin and others who've really championed this and who've had discussions, open discussions, and engaged people at AMS and NWA and online. We've started a meteorologist mental health Facebook page. There's so many different ways to discuss it now. So I think the discussion is definitely out there more now. We're still geeky scientists who like to sit in a room with computers and look at radar data. So this is, nothing makes people more squirmy than going to an AMS scientific conference and saying, we're going to talk about your feelings for the next hour and a half. But it's important.
I've shared this story before, guys. The super outbreak of 1974. This is how old I am. I was a senior in high school, and they sent me into some very hard hit areas that night with my ham radio gear, because in 1974, we didn't have cell phones. Yep. And I had my ham gear in Tuscaloosa was not hit. They said, go north. And they sent me to a community called Jasper, Alabama. And I got in there, and they sent me to the hospital. It was called the People's Hospital, downtown Jasper. And I was busy. For those on the show here that have a ham license, you're setting up a beam on 2 meters to relay information back to Birmingham, getting the cable strung, the transmission line. You get the communication link established, and we did all that. And then I opened my eyes, and I didn't even know this. They had put us in the emergency room. And I'm telling you, I've not talked about that night since it happened. I've not talked about it publicly. I've not talked about it privately. And I had night terrors, and I didn't know what to do. I'm supposed to be some tough kid from rural South Alabama that's not bothered by this stuff, but it was horrifying. I can't tell you how bad it was. And so this initiative and all this is very important because it affected me at a very young age. And I've worked a lot of events since then. And it's so great to know that there's no stigma with it now. You can ask for help. And it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength if you do ask for a behavioral health professional.
Absolutely. Okay, Christina's back. You're all charged up and ready to go here. So we're just talking about, Troy asked a question about, do we think it's getting better? Do we think that it's easier to have discussions about this, or do more people know that this is an issue in meteorology? I said, I think definitely so, due in large part to work you've done, Becky's done, the stuff we've done at AMS and NWA. I mean, what are some of the things that you've worked on to try to get that out? I mean, I know you've been introducing it into some of the courses at the training center, like the hurricane messaging and WCM course, and talk about some of the ways you've been trying to spread the word about this.
Yeah, we started out with adding some components to a couple of the residence training classes, specifically our decision support boot camp, because that was a pretty obvious audience that could use the training, and just provided some basics of what is critical incident stress and getting them talking about it and sharing, like, just generally, what are the things that stress you out when you work events? Let's talk about them. And it was really heartening to see how quickly people were willing to open up and talk through things. We added it to that effective hurricane messaging class as well. And from that ended up building a kind of basics class so that everybody in weather service has the opportunity to take that. So we now have a module as part of one of the forecaster training series that everyone can take, that kind of goes over the basics again and gets them just familiarized that this is a thing that you might deal with. Everybody's reaction is going to be different, and it could be different in different situations. One event that you think might impact you, you might be fine, and another one you might have a reaction. That's okay. So we're kind of have some of those basic conversations, and now we're building from there to specifically talk. We're hoping in this month to release a module that specifically talks about the stress of doing the damage survey components of active weather, whether it's flooding or tornado or tsunami or fire, and recognizing that kind of that going out and interacting with the public piece, that has some different stress compared to working in the office, and how do you have conversations with survivors, equipping folks to be able to manage that and be prepared. So that's a lot of the training that we're in the process of doing and building on it in some other places. We're kind of replacing what's in boot camp with some other stuff. The biggest thing, honestly, that we've been able to accomplish otherwise is we hired a public health service officer. Lieutenant Commander Valerie Gardner now works for the National, well, she's stationed with the National Weather Service, and she has a behavioral health background. And so she's not only helping us on this topic, but general employee wellness, like think all the burnout conversations we've had with COVID, and just because any of that baseline stress and wellness stuff that we're not taking care of, then you add on a big event, it makes that even harder to deal with. So she's kind of helping us contend with both pieces of that puzzle. And we're hoping to also do some more work on maybe developing like a peer support network, so that if Rick, you didn't feel comfortable talking to Valerie or talking to a professional in behavioral health, but you did feel comfortable talking to me because you knew I've worked operations, I know the type of thing you've been through, so that you could reach out and talk to me, and I'd have some additional training to be able to then help you process what you're going through and see where you might need some additional help or not. So we're going down some of those paths to try to figure out what other structural support we can provide, even thinking through things of, right now we rely on offices who've gone through an event to reach out for help, but where are there certain situations that, why don't we just make it standard operating procedure that like the default is you're going to get somebody to come and chat and come in and connect with you, rather than waiting and having to request it. So thinking through some kind of structural programmatic things that we can do to help make this easier. And in all of that, then trying to find other ways to, with professional societies, be able to bring this to the broader community on just, it's not just weather service folks, it's broadcasters, it's our research partners, it's private sector folks who are all encountering some of the same things. So we all share and learn from each other.
I've got to bail out in a minute, but just two quick points. The peer support network, I think that's really big. I know, Jen, you commented that. I really like that idea. That's something we already do informally, like reaching out to, I had people reach out to me after some of the December tornadoes, other events, it happens kind of informally where people are checking on each other, but it would be good to formalize that a little bit. And really, you can't really, to me, it's so important and so gratifying that hiring Valerie Gardner and the Support Weather Service headquarters is given to this. Every session that we did on this at AMS and NWA, John Murphy or Louie or Mary or somebody was in the room for it the entire time. They really support it and stand behind it. So having the leadership who understands it and recognizes it's an issue, I think is a huge thing. So I hate to leave. We could talk about this all night, but I'll let you guys continue on. Christina, thank you so much. And I owe you 2 emails. You'll hear from me tomorrow.
Right. Thanks, Rick.
All right, Rick's got to go down to join Bill Murray at Hooters for 50-cent beer night.
Well,
Rick, y'all have a good time down there.
I hope he's still there or he remembers who I am.
And let's welcome Kim, who has joined us. Kim, welcome. Glad you could make it. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, guys. And Christina, it's so good to see you. I have to say, I've been so proud of everything she's done for so many years. I think we met at the NWA meeting in Birmingham, and I remember how much you were struggling. And when we both landed in DC, you were talking to me about this dream you had to create this program, and it was such an amazing idea. And it's one of those things that you hear it and you immediately recognize on its face, this is brilliance, and this is something that needs to be shared. So I'm just so excited that it's made this much progress and you're doing what you dreamed of doing. And she just had this dream and she said, you know what, operational forecasting is great and it's wonderful, but I have to do this. I have to do this for all of our people, who suffer this way. And, you're just doing it so well. And I want to, Troy addressed earlier that there's, some of this goes on in a lot of facets of work where people are interacting with other people in a disaster zone. And this is certainly something that is a recognized issue too in the social sciences, when we're going into active disaster zones where, it's maybe less incidental that we're interacting with the people involved. That's our sample population. And for those who are interested, the Natural Hazards Center has put together a training for us too. It's called Conducting Emotionally Challenging Research. And it's a really neat training module that gets into some of this. And before my team went into the field last week, I offered them some of the high points of that training. And it was the first time that my team had ever been to an active disaster zone. And I knew it would be emotionally challenging, especially because some of the team members were doing personally significant research. And so there's this really interesting feature in the social sciences where we recognize that we're part of the research instrument, our person. And I was telling them, part of the important thing you have to recognize here is that you're going to feel, and it's okay. It makes you human, and it'll probably open up doors. Relationship building is a piece of successful research in our area. And if you need to turn off your recorder and let someone cry on your shoulder, you can, of course, ask them if they want to do that. You don't just grab somebody, but you can offer that. And I think my team kind of looked at me like, I can't imagine myself doing that, but that happened a lot. And there were a lot of conversations we had to have where people walked through very emotionally challenging things they discovered that were happening to people that they, really cared about, and there were causes they really cared about. And we had to walk through this line of, when you get really deeply involved in this, there are ethical considerations to some of the features of reporting. And so we have a lot we feel, a lot we experience, and also limitations on what we can do. And that puts some unique stresses on too. So there are a lot of things going on in many dimensions of the disaster space. And it's hard. It's not something that you get trained for in the social sciences either. I took a whole course on interviewing, and never, ever did they mention training for anything like this. I learned it on the ground when I went to Alabama for the first time. And so when Christina was talking about, when you were talking about all of the things you were feeling, I felt the same way. I just threw myself out there. Like, this was the thing I was supposed to do, was field work. My committee told me to do this. They prepared me not at all for what that experience would be like. And I think we can do better. We can do more as we institutionalize, more of this. I love the way you framed it. We've got to build the structure around our people to get that support. So thank you. It's good to see you guys. It's good to be back from another field expedition. Never is easy, always extremely rewarding. And Christina, just wonderful to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Well, I'll add to what you're talking about as far as the other people in the disaster zone and realizing how many others are kind of in this space too. Red Cross volunteers. That was kind of one of our first solid connection points. They've got some resources they've developed for their volunteers on this. And so we built from stuff that they've provided for their folks. And the Department of Justice, they have a whole group that deals with vicarious trauma, with folks who are like social worker type folks who are dealing with people who've been through very traumatic experiences. And it's kind of that secondhand trauma, but it's still, they're working through that as well. So it's fascinating to see how many of the folks in the psychology and behavioral health, they see what we are doing as a community and are impressed with what we're doing and are applauding us and encouraging us to keep going, because they're like, you're on the right path and you guys are leading the way for a lot of other communities that are realizing this risk to folks as well. So yeah, I thank you and Julie Demuth and several of our other social scientists who I think it's just perfect timing that you guys were all coming into this space as this was all coming up. So.
Hey, Christina, let's go back to April 27th. What was it like working in Huntsville on that shift that day?
Oof. Well, so I worked forecast shifts leading up to the outbreak. And it was just interesting how the timing worked out. I was doing the kind of long-term forecasting desk in the 3 days prior. So I was doing a lot of briefings and kind of trying to get everybody ramped up and prepared with our partners. And then it just so happened by quirk of schedule, I shifted to the short-term desk the day of the outbreak. So I was going to be on radar. And I think I was on for 14 hours that day. I came in early for my shift because stuff had already spun up. And in North Alabama, we had that early morning, like overnight early morning round. Our midnight shift took most of the care of, but then I kind of came in on the tail end of that and then handled the next 2 rounds. And it was exhausting, and it was the challenge both of just trying to stay focused on what you're doing while this is the first event that I'd seen where you're getting video of the tornadoes on the TV. I know that happens in Oklahoma all the time, but not so much in Alabama, where you're getting videos of tornadoes coming into Coleman, and you're verifying your own warning with the TV coverage and seeing the debris balls, because we didn't have dual pole yet, but we were still able to see the debris balls as Phil Campbell got taken out, and remembering that feeling of like, I don't know what was in Phil Campbell before, but whatever was there isn't there anymore. And having that reaction, but needing to like give yourself the moment, but you've got to go issue other warnings. And just the sheer pace of it all. It was the biggest memory that I have, besides when one of the EF 4 or 5 tracks came real close to the office, and we had to go take shelter because our operations area in Huntsville, like one whole side of it is windows. So we didn't really know what those were rated for, so we needed to go take shelter. And I remember just being impatient because like there was no sense of that we were at risk. It was the sense of, I need to be back on the desk issuing warnings. I hate that somebody else is having to take care of our warnings and our people. I just want to get back to my desk and do the thing. So that continues to be one of the biggest memories, besides having to go to the bathroom at some point has to happen when you're working operations. And I distinctly remember getting somebody to say, okay, you're going to watch my sector. I'm going to literally run to the bathroom and run back. And we're in a university facility, so our bathroom's outside our door. And I remember coming out the door and there's a whole bunch of grad students just sitting in the hallway. I'm like, that's weird. And I continue running to the bathroom and I run back. And I found out later, it's like, oh, the power had gone out, but we didn't realize it. And because we had to power the bathroom, there were lights there. So the grad students were basically sitting outside our office because there was light and a functioning bathroom. And so that's why they were all there. But it's just like little flashes that kind of come to me from that day. And just also then the really eerie driving home in complete black because all of North Alabama was without power for a week. And just that eerie darkness after such a long day. Those are the things that really kind of flash in my memory from the day itself.
What advice can you give a weather service forecaster now that might go through this at some point in their career? What did you learn from that, and what advice can you give others that ultimately might go through a day like that?
The biggest thing that I don't think any of us did a great job of was taking a moment to take a breath whenever you could. Like I said, it's like I literally ran to the bathroom and ran back. It's like, chances are somebody could have watched it. I had to have trust in other people to be like, I am literally just going to take deep breaths as I slowly walk to the bathroom, give myself just a minute of a mental break before coming back in and not feeling like I have to be here every minute or something's going to fall apart. Just giving yourself those moments and being able to kind of just, sit back and stretch and have healthy snacks there for yourself to keep you going. Because, while we all love the donuts and we all love the pizza, that's not necessarily the best thing for keeping ourselves going through a 14-hour day. So those were things I wish I had done for myself. But the thing that I'm glad I did and glad I had, that I hope other people will recognize and acknowledge and take advantage of, is the team that's around you. That we had such a great crew working that day who it was seamless in terms of like, you've got that, I've got that, we've got this, you've got this. Okay, we weren't trying to duplicate what each other was doing. We had confidence in each other, and we had confidence that we were going to get things done. So acknowledging that you've got that team and recognizing that and just being really proud, like take the moment to be proud of your team. And that I think then also helps keep you going.
I'd like to follow on with that with asking another question that gets in the forecast office perspective. And I'm less familiar with what things were like back in 2011 when you were doing that. But you mentioned something that sparked my interest. You said that you were both, issuing these warnings, but also you were getting verification, live on TV for the warnings you were issuing.
Yeah.
And now, as IDSS has grown in importance, it's my impression that that's kind of a set of duties that can be more separated now, where there are people who are doing more of the IDSS and that communication link to communities as things are going live, and they're not necessarily the same people who are responsible for issuing the warnings. I'm wondering if you can comment about that. Is that something that is happening? If it is or isn't, do you think that might be something that could help or has any sort of implication for mental health? Because there is this really challenging piece of in real time absorbing both the duty of what you're doing and the consequences of the hazard for the society that you're watching. It just strikes me that that's a whole lot at once to be taking in.
Yeah. And when I say, we knew what was happening, we were getting the verification, in my mind, that was we had a couple of TVs up in our operations area for situational awareness, which is common for most offices. And I'm at my warning desk, but you're hearing the things that are going on, and you look over and, hey, there's a tornado ripping through Coleman. It was hearing it and understanding it from my radar desk. I wasn't collecting the reports and things like that. And I think your point is interesting about really what are the impacts versus the verification that you need as a warning operator to know, okay, we have confirmation there's a tornado on this cell. That changes some of my plans for warnings downstream or updates to my warnings. I think there's some value of, if somebody is collecting the reports and has the information of, yes, confirmed tornado, and yes, we already have reports of 5 fatalities. Like, the warning operator needs the tornado confirmation, but doesn't necessarily need the 5 people are dead information at that moment. And I think that is something maybe worth a conversation on how we separate those pieces until you have time to then deal with the process in the aftermath. And it was interesting. I was listening to a podcast today on an episode on decision architecture. And they were talking about the Captain Sullenberger and the flight that he took into the Hudson, and talked about how there were certain pieces of information he had to load shed so he could focus on particular issues. And this kind of is in those lines of, like, what can you load shed to make the decisions you have to make easier to make, and the variables that impact that decision, versus this is extraneous information that I might be interested in later, but not right now.
On the storm survey work that you did following that event, what was the one thing that really stood out in your mind?
I still remember the names of everyone at one particular house who died. That one sticks out to me in my memory.
Would that be the Hallmark family?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Hallmark family. I still
and
remember.
let me just say, I spoke with Ari on the phone for a long time. She's 16 now. And now I guess she turned 17 this year. She's a very strong young woman. She struggled with, and for those that don't know, 5 members of her family were killed in the house, and her parents, 2 of her grandparents, and a cousin. And she went through some hard times. She went through rebellion and anger and depression and all these things. But anyway, just to let you know, Christina, she's doing fine now. So she's doing great.
That's really great to hear. That's really great to hear. It's the stories like that there's a couple others that still stick with me. And there's also, there's still visuals, and it might just be some of the pictures that I took on the damage survey that I saw so many times putting up on our website to put up, survey results and all that kind of thing. But there was a gas station that got destroyed, and just like the price sign just being down and in, just torn and twisted into pieces, that I still can very vividly see. A post through the windshield of a pickup truck. There was a car up in a tree down in Coleman County, and there was a tractor trailer or a mobile home that had been on the property that ended up like across the street and down in the holler. And just seeing how far that had gone. Thankfully, that family had made it into the house that was on the property as well. But there's bits and pieces of the visuals of that day that really stick out to me. But also there's like one of the volunteer fire departments, I just still distinctly remember we were out doing a survey, and somebody from the volunteer fire department had seen us out there, and they're like, whenever you guys get hungry, you better come on over to Ruth Volunteer Fire Department, and we're going to make sure you guys get some food. And just going over there, and they were just adamant that they were going to feed us and give us water and pray for us and just give us big hugs like that. I still remember Ruth Volunteer Fire Department from that day, because they were the bright spot. And then like the one place that we found that had like a open fast food restaurant with a functioning ice cream machine. Still remember that. Those are
and Kim, let me bring you into this. You just came back from a trip. Does it get any easier after doing this for all these years for you, Kim?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I probably haven't really absorbed all of last week enough yet to say for sure. I think you develop coping strategies, and especially when you do have that goal in mind. I never lose sight of why I'm doing it. And for me, when I'm with these people, I think the advantage of working in the social science piece of it is that there's a part of it where we are providing an outlet that's almost therapeutic to the individuals that are talking with us. So what I get to experience is both traumatic and sad and joyful and healing. And it's all of those things. So it's hard, but it also always makes me come away feeling like I see the best of humanity too. And it's very refreshing. So I think it's really hard to say. I think this was the first time I'd been able to go in and do field work, a big field work project since having children. I was able to go in 2019 after having my first to Alabama for the Lee County event. But that was mostly, I was looking at the integrated warning team, and I wasn't looking as much at the survivors. So this time going in after having had children, and the thing about what we're doing is we're stepping so much into the stories, and that can get really difficult emotionally to separate. And being in places where they've lost children, or just when you can really identify with the situation is when it's really, really hard. So I think in some ways I've made, I've adapted and, done some of this training that wasn't available when I was early on. But in other ways, it's getting more complicated as I can walk through some of this with more and more people. It's just hard work. It's hard work. We're all involved in a very, very, disasters are very difficult. They're complicated, and there's no single way to feel about them. And people, talk about, they look on the surface of a disaster and say, oh, well, if you'd just done this or that, or, if everyone wants to be reductive about it. But the thing is, you probably will do best, and we'll all do best if we can throw ourselves into it and just be in the complexity and allow that to exist. And that's actually a healthy mental coping strategy too, that allowing, to exist and not forcing that sense of control. Like, I have some ability to control these outcomes perfectly. You don't have to be so despondent that you give up, but you also don't have to pretend that it's all in your sphere of control. It's really targeting this. Here's where the pieces that I can contribute, that I can do something with, and recognizing that this is work that we all believe in. And at some point you do have to recognize the ends of your power. And that's actually a good thing to do. And I don't know if, Christina, that's anything that resonates with. I'd love to see the training that you're putting together. I think it could have value for so many of us. But that's been something that has helped me to really digest what I experience, and to help others in our field to digest after some of these big events happen.
It's interesting, this sphere of influence, sphere of control conversation. That's when the psychologists have talked to me about, the challenges facing our community. They see that as one of the biggest risks for us, is that we feel like we want to be able to control situations, but the nature of the work we do is messaging, communication, trying to encourage others to act. But I literally cannot, even take my mother and pick her up and put her in the basement when there's a tornado coming. Like, I cannot do that. And recognizing that limits and embracing them in some ways is one of the biggest factors of being able to kind of cope with a lot of this. And I love Valerie Gardner, our public health service officer. She always says, she's like, this is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. And so once you know that whatever your reaction is it's normal to have a reaction of any kind, and that it's okay, I think helps also then, even if it doesn't, this training doesn't prevent somebody from having an experience with critical incident stress, knowing what it is that's happening to me, I think is hugely empowering to then feel like, okay, I understand something's happening. I know that there are tools out there that I can access to deal with this. Those pieces, I think, will hopefully continue to make this easier for us as a community to manage, even though we can't take away the exposure we all have, the risk that we face of dealing with all of this.
Christina, can you stay with us for a few more minutes? Do you have to go?
Yeah. Nope, I'm
okay.
good.
Okay, good. We need to take a quick break here. We're going to come back and we want to talk about the Iowa tornadoes and the warning process. And there were some technical issues, and we're going to, I'd like to talk with Dr. Jacobs about that and everybody else, because there were some problems in disseminating warnings coming out of Des Moines. And we'll talk about that. We'll do picks of the week, weather roundup, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Last week, I described how the ISS overcomes the effects of atmospheric drag with its engines, either on the station itself or with a visiting vehicle that is used to boost the station up by about 1 kilometer or so every month or two. There's another use of those engines that comes up from time to time. But first, a bit about pointing satellites. When you put a satellite into orbit around something, whether it's a tennis ball can-sized CubeSat or the football field-sized ISS, it's all about what the satellite can see. Picture a traffic circle from above with a car going round and round. That roof is facing up all the time, right? Well, that's what a satellite would do if it was launched into orbit with no other forces put on it. Satellite people refer to this as an inertial reference frame because, well, Newton's law of inertia holds and everything's relative to space. That's great if your satellite needs to look out into space, like, say, the James Webb Space Telescope. It's not so great for something like the ISS or nearly any other satellite in orbit around Earth, which needs to be looking back at, well, Earth. We need to tip that car on its side so the roof is always facing into the traffic circle. Satellite people call this local vertical, local horizontal reference frames. That's just a fancy way of saying that the station is oriented to stay relative to Earth, not space. And this is accomplished by rotating the ISS once each 90-minute orbit. This is done using relatively small, electrically powered reaction wheels. Turn them in one direction, the station goes in the opposite direction. Turns out you can rotate things pretty easily in space without burning a drop of hydrazine, until you can't. Remember how last week I said that space isn't empty, specifically at the altitude that the ISS flies. There's all manner of forces pulling and pushing on the ISS. Gravity and atmospheric drag and the solar wind and et cetera, et cetera. There's limits to how much those reaction wheels can counteract those forces. When that limit is reached, the system is said to be saturated. It must be desaturated externally. And that's when those engines come back into play. That's the other place that we need those visiting vehicles. So the next time that you see an image of Mission Control in Houston, look for the console labeled ADCO, ADCO. This is the Attitude Determination Control Officer. And there's somebody there 24/7, 365, making sure that the station is pointed in the right direction. Elsewhere in the sky, the moon reaches first quarter phase this Thursday before sunrise. A treat for those of you closer to the Pacific time zone. Along the terminator, in line between day and night on the moon, look for two pretty cool sights that are formed by light that just rakes the top of a couple of well-placed craters. About a third away from the top is a V formation. And about a third of the way from the bottom is an X. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
Calling all weather enthusiasts. Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band at amsweatherband.org. As an AMS Weatherband member, you'll get to go behind the scenes with the scientists of the American Meteorological Society, whose members have been at the forefront of weather, water, and climate research for over 100 years. You'll learn about the very latest research from the scientists who are actually doing it. What's more, you'll become a part of a passionate online community of weather enthusiasts. Get access to exclusive videos, webinars, and other fun content, and support the science you love. Learn more and join the band today at amsweatherband.org.
And let's bring in the legendary Bruce Jones of Midland Radio. Bruce, how are you? Welcome.
I'm good, James. I'm in the Dells, Wisconsin for the Wisconsin Emergency Management meeting up here. We had about 4 inches of snow last night.
Oh, wow. You stay busy this time of the year, don't you? It never stops.
Yeah, I was in South Carolina for their emergency management meeting last week, and the week before that out in Colorado. So this is the time of the year when the emergency managers can get together and undergo more training and compare notes. And boy, it's interesting to hear their respect for the National Weather Service. They really respect the National Weather Service and the job that those women and men do.
That's awesome. So let's talk about we've had some severe weather here lately. We've had the horrible situation in Iowa. We have Arkansas, and we're getting into the core of the spring segment of the tornado season for much of the country. And having a way of getting warnings. We talk about this often. You need more than one way, but the baseline, it's a NOAA weather radio. I hear this all the time, Bruce. I've got my phone here. I got my phone. I don't need a weather radio. Well, yes, you do. Explain why.
Well, I just talked today with Ken Harding, the director of Central Region Headquarters, because there were some reports in the media that the Des Moines National Weather Service office had all these delays in getting warnings out. But Ken told me that NOAA Weather Radio, he said, was a great success story. He said NOAA Weather Radio carried the day in Iowa because there was no delay with the NOAA Weather Radio. There was no delay with EAS. They were working the 800 megahertz radio system across the state of Iowa to make sure that those warnings were getting out. But there was a delay to third-party cell phone vendors. So again, we remind people just to have multiple redundant ways of getting these warnings, but kudos to the National Weather Service. All of their NOAA Weather Radio transmitters were on the air during that event on Saturday. All of them worked perfectly. And as Ken Harding said, it was a great success story for NOAA Weather Radio.
And let's stress that NOAA Weather Radio is an independent RF network that has nothing to do with cellular networks or cellular coverage.
Yeah. I've been, I started my career in radio, as did you, James, and radio is a really good, solid way to get a communication signal out. The signals go a long ways. Usually the receivers are inexpensive devices, and it's just a very, very good way to communicate, especially in an emergency, and especially when you need to get messages or alerts out rapidly, because that signal that comes off that tower hits all the receivers at exactly the same time. There's no delay, there's no latency. Radio is an immediate broadcast, and it's a broadcast that's coming direct from the National Weather Service office nearest you. So honestly, it's the first line of defense, and I don't think there's any faster way of getting the warnings than via NOAA Weather Radio.
And people say, well, what if your power goes out? Well, to my knowledge, Bruce, almost every model that you offer, they've got a battery backup.
Yeah, by public alert certification, to get that little public alert certification, there are certain specifications, and one of them is the radio has to have battery backup so that it'll operate even when the power goes out. And when you think of that, if you have a power failure in your home, you're going to lose your TV. It's not going to work. You might lose some of your internet-based telephone. There's no telling what in this day and age goes out when you lose your electricity. But by public alert certification, that little white desktop weather radio has to have battery backup. And that allows it to continue operating even when the tornado's ripping down power lines, as they always do.
Let's
so
talk
we
about
have a
the 25% offer. What a deal.
Yeah, it's a special offer. For those of you who are listening to WeatherBrains, there's a special offer. If you'd like to buy a weather radio for yourself or somebody in your family, or maybe there's a business or a daycare center that you do business with, get them a weather radio. I mean, this is a great act of kindness and consideration for other people. And it allows the National Weather Service to alert them automatically, instantaneously. So if you go to midlandusa.com and use the promo code SPAN25, that's SPANN25, SPANN25, SPAN25 is the promo code that will get you 25% off all the weather products and accessories. And we have some free shipping if you buy a whole bunch of them. But bottom line is you can get a weather radio for a decent price. And you know, when it comes down to saving a life, what price can you put on the life that you save? We have the emergency crank radio, which is good for hurricane zones. It's good for an ice storm where you might lose power for several days. And really my favorite is this little white desktop model where you can tell it, I live in such and such a county, only alert me for my county. And by the way, I don't want to be alerted for Amber Alerts, for instance. So they're available at midlandusa.com. Use the promo code SPAN25, SPANN25, and you'll get 25% off on your purchase.
Awesome, Bruce. Thank you. We'll talk to you here in a second. And I do want to talk with everybody here about what happened in Des Moines. Neil, have you had a chance to look at this from your vantage point? You're our computer dweeb here, our IT guy. What happened? Do you know?
I mean, I don't know exactly what happened. I think there's a couple stories floating around that seem to make a fair amount of sense, and that it really comes back to a couple different things. One, it appears that in DFW they were out a landline, and it sounds like they had gone over to VSAT to move a lot of information back and forth. And from what I gather, that uses a different queue, which also somehow meets up with what's being issued out of Des Moines. And I don't know necessarily that what is like a warning, a tornado warning, is necessarily prioritized in the queue related to other information from like our river forecast center or something else would be put in there. So that could potentially cause a delay. I mean, there's other issues too related to push versus pull information. And if you're running pull, how often are you querying the system? But I think that this was probably a combination of a couple different things that just happened at once. And usually when a bad event like this happens, it's usually more than one thing contributing to it. But I think the bigger issue in my mind is how do you avoid something like this happening? And the Weather Service, in my opinion, is really, they're kind of in a jam when it comes to a lot of the IT infrastructure and hardware management. Whenever they do get money, it's usually through a disaster supplemental bill. It's not through regular budget. And so that they're kind of in a situation where you spend money to sort of patch up and fix what you have because you kind of have to, and you don't necessarily have the budget to invest in building out a new, better system. And you got to do both in parallel. You can't switch over to a new system until you fully built up the new system. And so you're going to have to fund the rollout and of the new system while you're maintaining the old system. So there's a time period where there's some overlap where you almost need more funds in the short term than you do in the long term, because you're maintaining a legacy system while developing a new system. You can't turn off the legacy system until the new system is proven out. And so they're in a situation where they don't have the budget to do both. So the money gets directed to patching up basically a system that's obsolete. And these events are the kind of thing that's going to happen when it gets overloaded. And it's only going to get overloaded most often in major weather events, because that's when it's used the most. And that's when you need it to be the most reliable.
Bruce, looks like you got the scoop too on that.
Yeah, I actually took some notes when I was talking to Ken Harding, and I hope my notes are correct, Ken. Dallas Fort Worth had been on that VSAT system for a couple of days, and that's a I guess a river forecast center and a weather forecast office. So there had been a lot of messages going into that system for several days, causing kind of a backup of messages in there. And then Des Moines was using the same circuit. And so as Des Moines began to issue messages, I guess there was just kind of this backlog where the system was trying to chug through all these other messages. And, they did their best to move the messages up in the queue. Ken said there was no delay to the EAS messages for the TV stations and radio stations, no delay to NOAA Weather Radio. But he did say that text products through the third-party vendors were probably delayed. So to Neil's point, I think there's just so much data and so much information that the National Weather Service is trying to move from point A to point B. And boy, they need a bigger pipeline. Is that it, Neil?
Well, I mean, they do need a bigger pipe, but I think there's probably an alternate solution where they could centralize more of this instead of trying to worry about moving data back and forth. Because anytime you're moving data, you're either relying on the size of the pipe or just the pipe being up. I mean, there's a lot of forecast offices that don't have redundant landlines that I know of.
I'd like to ask a stupid question for you guys to follow up on this. Some of us need this explained like we're 5. I am struggling to understand how in 2022, where the messages we're talking about from the surface level don't look that complicated. Like, why are we talking about a series of essentially text messages, not getting through a system, taking multiple minutes? I can text. I'm very fast at texting. I can send probably 30 text messages in a minute, flat out. Why can the Weather Service not? What makes these so complicated?
Yeah, there's no 30 megabyte file attached to this. There's no 500 meg video attached to this. It's just it's a string of text. I agree with Kim. What's the deal, Neil?
Well, so the warning, the tornado warnings are relatively small, but there's the other information that was going through that pipe or that circuit at the same time could have been a lot larger. And that goes back to this idea of whether or not it's properly being prioritized in the queue. It may have to crank through much more information to get to a smaller file size. And you'd be surprised, when you convert text into ones and zeros, it's not necessarily always as small of a file as you would think it would be.
I do have a question. So when we talk about it was third party was affected, so was this more like platforms like Weather Message, where there was a delay there? Because I know that for myself, that's how I get warnings for all the different radio stations. Was that impacted? And was the chat, was that still impacted, or was that immediate still, or was there a delay there in National Weather Service chat? I'm just curious. I don't know where all the delays were and how that had an impact on disseminating things to the public.
I can't answer that. I mean, chat tends to get bogged down in these major outbreaks, but I think that's a different issue than the landline versus VSAT.
Okay.
So let's, Jen, while you're here, let's kind of talk about the actual event. You posted some notes in the chat here about what actually happened.
Yeah, the long track tornado that went through, it was earlier today, National Weather Service rated it EF4 with peak winds of 170, and the path length was 69.5 miles. That was the tornado that went through the Winterset area and caused the fatalities. And a couple of statistics on that. Historically, it was, first of all, the first EF4 in Iowa since October 4th, 2013, and that one occurred in Woodbury and Cherokee counties. Second longest tornado in Iowa history since 1980. I take that back, since 1980, behind the longest occurring one in 1984. And then from what I can tell, this was only the second F4 EF4 in March. The other one was March 13th, 1990, in that very historic outbreak. There was an F4 then as well. So I know that they're still out surveying, and of course, this rating is preliminary. There was an EF2, there was an EF3 in Wayne and Lucas counties, and that also caused a fatality. And then there were at least 3 other EF2s that day.
What was the final death toll? Do we know now?
7 is from, I think, is what I understand. The last I'd heard was 7. 6 in Madison, Warren, Polk, Jasper counties with the EF4, there were 6. And then the 1 from an EF3 in Wayne and Lucas counties. And that was near Derby.
Wow, tough indeed. So we're running up against time here, but we got to do picks of the week. So everybody, including Christina, that's the reason we ask you to stay. You got to come up with a good pick for us. We're going to do picks of the week. Everybody's going to share something that's weather related. And I think a lot of us, our picks had to do with the dissemination issue. That was mine. Daryl Hertzman put out some tweets on the tweeter about it. And he was very frustrated. And again, that's my pick of the week, and we've discussed that. So Troy, let's go over to you. What's your pick this week?
I didn't really have one, but I will say that I guess it was Jennifer Gray and Justin James, who are meteorologists at CNN, had I thought a pretty good story, and it backs up what Dr. Neal and Bruce have told us about sort of what was going on at the time. I've kind of stayed quiet about this because as Jen pointed out, we had 7 fatalities. And I guess my question will be, what's it going to take? 10 or 20 fatalities or 30 before we get and we look at this? I mean, I'm just asking, will it take 50 fatalities? I ask, but I also go back to what Bruce said. I can tell you right now, those weather radios, that is very independent of this dissemination system. And it is the most instant way to get it. The minute they hit that AWIPS button at New Braunfels or any other National Weather Service office anywhere, it's going directly to weather radio. And you must have that weather radio. You must have that weather radio.
All right. Well, Bruce, let's go to you. What's your pick of the week?
I may steal Jen's, but I was on the Des Moines National Weather Service site today. You know, it's amazing how quickly they can do a damage survey. They don't have the photographs on there yet, but I'm just amazed. It used to take 3, 4, 5 days before we would be able to read these things. And now, you know, within 24 hours, they've got teams out there tracking all of these tornadoes. And so a tip of the hat to National Weather Service Des Moines on their website. Up at the very top of the page, they've got a click where you can see what they've done preliminarily, and then they're going to follow up with more, but just amazing work.
Indeed. All right, Kim, let's go to you for your pick of the week.
Sure. Well, I follow on with a whole string of us who I think were really interested in different aspects of this event. My pick of the week was a tweet by Daryl Hertzman. I think I'm going to have to actually refresh the link because he refreshed his analysis, but it's generally a graph of across the whole weather service, what were the latencies on all the products that were issued, and for the Des Moines office that day, what did those latencies look like? And for especially those of us who were at the lab, we're working on technologies to create more rapidly updating warnings and things like this. We really are very interested in the performance of these dissemination systems for the things that we're researching to really be able to get transitioned into the weather service. So Neal, everything you were talking about with, that whole, you have to maintain the current system, but develop in parallel to build new. We're doing that in pieces, but I really want to, this is important to make sure that the dissemination piece is just as well shepherded as every other technology involved in the warning system that's getting an overhaul.
Well, Kim, I've got a question for you. I mean, being involved in the workshop that I was with y'all a few years ago, the fastest workshop, I got a feeling if we do these updates and we're wanting to go more graphics wise, that flow of data through these dissemination spigots is not going to get any less.
Nope, it's not. We're only making it more complicated. And let me tell you, after seeing what Daryl's been putting out, there are several of us who are having, I'll just say they're existential moments right now. what we're doing, and what will be the reality of this in. We always say that the arc of the development timeline, it's when is fast it's going to happen is a very popular question. And it's always 5-10 years in the future. And that's probably just going to be the answer forever until some of these systems are really in place to get those innovations working.
All right, Neil, let's go to you. What's your pick of the week?
Well, that was actually kind of a good segue. So moving data around makes me nervous. And the more data we have, the more exposure we have to things failing. So my pick of the week is some work that's come out of Amazon Web Services about a complete AWIPS package that runs in the cloud. And they're using it for training, but hey, you know, if it works for training, it could work for operations. Just saying.
There you go. There you go. It's a great concept there. All right, Aubrey, before you have to do television, let's go to you for your pick of the week.
All right. Well, this was I bookmarked this before the weekend, and I thought this was really cool. So this is non-Iowa tornado related. I did not even know that NCEI was on Twitter, but they are on Twitter. It's NOAA NCEI, and they put together this really awesome graphic of hurricane strikes from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up the East Coast from 1950 to 2021. They've got locations and details, and just really cool how they were able to squeeze everything on this one map. Really interesting to look at that. So it's a tweet from NOAA NCEI, used to formerly NCDC, NCEI. But I thought it was a great graphic.
That's awesome. National Centers for Environmental Information. That's what that stands for, I do believe. That's a great pick. All right, Jen, what you got for us? Go.
So I had two tweets, and the first one I will say Bruce has it because that was the survey, but the second one just shows the heart of the National Weather Service, and it's exactly what Christina talked about. It's exactly what we talk about with Neil and Rick about the importance of the National Weather Service, and that we could not do what we do without them. And they have the biggest hearts for service, and I think they're the unsung heroes here in this whole thing. And what the National Weather Service goes through from before the event, during, and after. And it gets up my crawl when people give them a hard time. It really does. And so this is their heart today as they're trying to figure out this survey. And people are like, oh, what is it? What's a rating? And all that. In the midst of it all, they say our sincere sympathies go out to the families affected by Saturday's storms. There has been interest today in the damage ratings of the tornadoes, but foremost in our hearts and minds are the communities that were impacted and the lives that were lost or changed forever. That's from the National Weather Service in Des Moines. And so that's their heart. And so that's what's important.
And that's awesome. Let people bury their dead before you get hung up in all this other malarkey. Yes. Please give it a break. It's just like you have to have that heart, and that is great. So thanks, Jen. All right, Christina, we've stalled long enough. We've given you extra time to figure out a remarkably good pick of the week.
Well, I figured I'd go for shameless plugs since we didn't get to talk much about National Weather Association stuff. As president-elect, I feel like it's my duty to plug NWA as my pick, since we announced the location of this year's annual meeting.
Pittsburgh.
Yes, Pittsburgh. We're excited to head there August 20th through the 24th. And so I figured I'd also use this opportunity to remind everybody abstracts are due April 6th and awards nominations are due April 13th. And April 6th is also a good date for any students to flag. Keep an eye on the website because we're planning to have a student virtual speed mentoring session April 6th. So get your abstract in and then plan to come to the student speed mentoring.
Yeah, that's a great session. I've been to one of those. That's awesome. Now, Christina, I've got to ask. So you've got 1, 2, 3 guitars behind you. Are you a performer?
I love music. The guitars are my husband's. The ukuleles are mine. I like dealing with 4 strings. Adding more to that just overwhelms me. So I sing, I play piano, I do uke.
If you want to perform, this is your chance here. I mean, just saying. All right, but again, thank you for your work. It is. We've talked about an important subject matter this evening in terms of the personal side of what we do and the impacts of disasters on meteorologists and all of us. So it's an important work that you're doing. So thank you on behalf of all of us practitioners here. and keep it up. And anything we can do to help publicize anything, just let us know. What Nate Johnson, the NWA Grand Poobah here recently? What's his title now?
He this is his year as immediate past president. So he was president last year, and we kind of do a rotation. So he's still hanging around, bothering all of us. We enjoy hanging out with Nate still.
That's our show title for this week.
Yep.
All right, so awesome. So we got to wrap this thing up. But Christina, thank you again for joining us. It's been a great show.
Christina.
It was really good. And listen, all of our show notes and the picks of the week will be on the website, weatherbrains.com. And if you would like to get in touch with us, and I promise we'll do a longer email segment next week, the address is email@weatherbrains.com. And for those that are new, we typically record every Monday night at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. We do a video version on YouTube. And of course, most of you listen. But again, it's email@weatherbrains.com. So thank you for being here on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew. I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening and watching. Have a great week and God bless. Thanks, everybody. That was a great show.
Thanks, Christina.
Thanks, Christina.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Thanks for
Great.
your understanding with my tech snafus. I swear, it's the battery on the laptop usually lasts for like 5 hours. I'm like, oh, I won't need it. And then I realized I have a MiFi plugged in because my home internet isn't great, and it sucked the battery of the laptop. And
Are
so
you sure,
I was just like,
Christina? Are you sure, Christina, there's not a cable that runs to the weather service in Fort Worth off that laptop?